Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. Dispatches from Ashburn, day 4, playa out here for day 3 of training camp, at least from the practice perspective. I saw a more ramped up version of training camp. Of course, they're still not wearing any pads, but there was a little bit more intensity and a little bit more rotation that was happening with some of the position groups. And we got a little bit more of a sense as they start to kind of ramp up the energy and ramp up the practice regimens of what we're going to start to see when training camp begins, not in earnest, but we see more closer to what we can expect on Sundays with this team. Because as of right now, first couple of days, and you're going to hear from Ben Standing in about 20 minutes from The Athletic, where we just kind of talked about what have we really seen. And I taped this with him yesterday, and I'm not going to say that much has changed today, but we got a few more hints today of what we're going to get. And there were some position group pairings and matchups that were notable today. And of course, all eyes were on Jayden Daniels, mainly because he was going to conduct his first press conference of training camp, which happened earlier this afternoon. I thought the most interesting thing that he said today to the media was he was asked, when was the last time that you were not the starter at this point in a camp? And he said 2 years ago, LSU. And I think a lot of us kind of thought maybe that would be sometime either high school or pre-high school, but I guess he had to compete for the first time he became the starter at LSU. And of course, last year, entrenched as a starter, won the Heisman Trophy, had a humongous season, and ended up being obviously the second overall pick. But he was asked, when was that last time? And he said 2 years ago. But he knew what the insinuation was because Dan Quinn has not named him the starter at this point, and it continued today in practice where most of the at least first initial reps with the, what projects to be out the starting offensive line and the starting skill position players were taken, even in the limited amounts that they did this in red zone, 2-minute drill, and that type of functioning. He was not the starter. Marcus Mariota was. So that continues to be the way that they're going to play this for now. And when Dan Quinn was asked about that earlier, he basically said that they're not really going to try to get away from the plan. And he emphasized, and the way he kind of said it was, I want you all to understand, we're not trying to hide the news. We're not trying to bury the news. We're not trying to wait to make him, quote unquote, earn it when he already has. We want to go through all of the steps, and we want all those steps to be taken. And he was really, just kind of pointed and serious about it. You can keep asking me this 3 days into camp. We're just not ready to do it. And it doesn't mean that he's not going to end up being the starter in the very near future. It just means we want to go through this process. And as this process continues, as of right now, and we're still 2 weeks away from a preseason game, he's not going to be named the starter. And when you watch them in practice, they're not leaning in that direction as of yet. But when Daniels was asked about it, because look, he's the number 2 overall pick, the expectation he is ahead of schedule. The expectation is he is going to be the starter sooner rather than later. He said this about it because he knew what Ben's question was, where he was asking him, when was the last time you've had to wait for this? And he answered it just by saying, I love competing. Whether it's announced that I'm the starter or it's not announced that I'm the starter, it's not a problem because it'll be up to Adam Peters and Dan Quinn to make that decision, but it's not a problem for me. I like to compete. I want to compete. And even if I came in here and was named the starter, it doesn't mean that I wouldn't think that I have to win my job every year anyway, which I think is a healthy way to look at the situation as we move forward here. He's not pressuring them. He's not asking them to treat him different. He's being humble. And Quinn emphasized that, because he got a lot of questions and there was kind of this little back and forth laugh when someone said, I know we're asking a lot of Jayden Daniels questions, and Quinn just kind of popped back, yeah, we are. And Quinn emphasized he's not asking for a lot of attention. He's not asking for a lot of me. He's not asking to be treated like he's different. And so therefore, everybody just needs to understand he is acting like he's part of the team. We know that he's part of the team, and we're not trying to pressurize this situation any more than it already has to be. So Jayden Daniels spoke, showed the humility, says he's not bothered by the fact that he's not a starter. Marcus Mariota is still taking some, if not most, of the quote-unquote first-team reps. Again, shorts and jerseys, no full speed, no one's getting hit. It's not what you would describe as any kind of full-on fast, let's-go practice, but they are doing a lot of, critical moment type, practice with in the red zone and 2-minute drills. And for now, Mariota is leading the charge with getting the first team reps. So that's just notable. Number of other things that occurred today that I think are notable because we're starting to get some glimpses and hints of people that are moving around in different spots. But today, the offensive line saw a real significant, interesting rotation that was happening. For the majority of the first team reps, the starting offensive line was the group that we've grown accustomed to, and as of now, leaders in the gate to be the starters. And in the interior, I don't expect anything really to be different between the newly acquired Nick Allegretti and Tyler Biadasz and the carryover Sam Cosmi. I expect that to be the center of their line. The left tackle's Cornelius Lucas. He's clearly the front runner to remain that. And Andrew Wiley is the starting right tackle, clearly the front runner to remain that. But as practice progressed and they started doing some more work, Wiley was noticeably absent. And Trent Scott came in. Brandon Coleman, the rookie third-round pick, who was working as a backup left tackle for periods of time and then as a backup right tackle. And at one point, even kind of with the starting group or backup right tackle for periods of time. So they're figuring out with him like what his role is going to be. Afterwards, Wiley spoke to the media. There was no inclination that there was any kind of injury. So I think they were just working some people in, and it was the first time that we've kind of seen that with the offensive line, that they are going to work some players. Late in the spring, it was notable that Trent Scott was doing some work at left tackle with some of the starters. So I think that they are experimenting a little bit with the offensive line, which I think we all know doesn't come in here projecting to be the big-time strength of this team. I think it might be better, at least in their minds here, than people probably think that it is. But at the same time, I think they realize that there's not a Pro Bowler sitting out on either edge, and they're going to work these players in and out. Ricky Stromberg, who's been working, of course, was a third-round pick from a year ago, carryover player, got hurt late last year. He's been working as a third-team center, not the backup center. That's been Michael Dieter, who was an acquisition in free agency. So we'll be watching that. Is he a guard? Is he a center? And what role would he have with the offensive line? Trent Scott's an interesting kind of swing tackle. He's kind of taken that over from Cornelius Lucas, at least here early in camp, so we'll have to see how that one works out. We also got, and this is just notable, we also got a couple of glimpses at some role maneuvering by the defense today. And one was, we saw Dorrance Armstrong playing on both sides of the line, standing up at periods of time on the line. Frankie Luvu playing a traditional linebacker position, showing a rush potential, then lining up on the edge side in a stand-up position on that side of the line. We're waiting to see where Jamin Davis kind of fits in with all of that. And so we're starting to see kind of the versatility across the line that, just hints and glimpses of what the defense that Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt are starting to put together and how they may maneuver these pieces around. I will say this, and this is just a general takeaway after seeing this today for the first time, where we started moving people and kind of adjusting a little bit. For the first time, really, I'm starting to get a little more confident that the group that they have is better than people think that they are. I don't know that they have a consistent edge rusher, and so how are they going to generate pressure? There's a lot of questions clearly at corner, but I think they have a deep group with a lot of young players and some veterans interspersed, and I think they might be able to make do with what they have, but obviously they're going to have to prove that in real time. And so we'll have to just see how it plays out. One final thing on that, it was revealed today that Emmanuel Forbes did gain 15 pounds in the offseason, so they did want him to put on some weight, and hopefully it'll help bulk him up and give him a better shot to deal with the physicality of the NFL receivers as he heads into year 2 in a very prominent spot in this defense, in a position group that I think might be the most fascinating of all of them in terms of competition for not only who starts, who plays, but who makes the team and who doesn't. Yesterday, Dan Quinn was talking a lot about position flex, which Ben Standing and I are going to have a recurring joke about when you hear from him in just a little bit. Ben Standing from The Athletic and the Standing Room Only podcast will be joining me in just a few minutes. But I want to go back to those quotes about position flex. He used different terminology for it, but we were like laughing about it. That was like the drinking game under Ron Rivera, one of the terminologies that we had heard over and over and over through the years. But Dan Quinn's talking about it too. And, also in line with one of the biggest, probably most curious players that we're going to be watching this summer, the team did not pick up Jamin Davis's fifth-year option of his rookie contract. So he is heading into the final year of his current deal. And he has moved around. They brought him in as a linebacker. They tried him at a middle linebacker. That didn't work out. They moved him to an outside linebacker. His effectiveness in the defense under Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio just did not really manifest itself. And so as Dan Quinn comes in and takes a look at him as an athlete and as potentially someone who they can utilize in a skill set in various different ways, i.e., position flex, they are working him specifically with Ryan Kerrigan, the franchise's all-time sack leader, who is one of the few carryovers from the previous staff that is staying here, and he's working directly, at least what Quinn told us yesterday, working directly with Jamin Davis to try to help him learn the art of becoming an edge rusher, whether it's stand-up, hand to the dirt, blitzer, whatever it may be. Kerrigan obviously was a master at it, one of the franchise's all-time best, and he's trying to carry over some of that wisdom to him. So Davis is a really, really curious one to watch. Standing and Ben and I talk about this in a little bit. And if you recall yesterday when I had Logan Paulson on, he openly said, this is one of the players I'm watching very closely to see if he even makes the roster. So think about this for a moment. Frankie Louvu is here. Bobby Wagner is here. Jordan McGee has really turned some heads as a 5th-round pick. There are some other linebackers that are veterans that are on this roster that are going to get some run and opportunity. Jamin Davis seems to have kind of, I don't know if fallen out of the favor is the right word, but they're looking at him in a different spot. And if he doesn't produce, at the position that they hope or show that he warrants a spot and can be an effective player for them, he could be cut. So he's going to have to figure this out. After practice yesterday, I had a chance to catch up with Dante Fowler, who is the epitome of one of these position flex players. He can be a linebacker. He has been a rush end, situational passer. He's been an extremely effective player, specifically under Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt when he was in Dallas, and he's followed Quinn around to various different spots because he has really performed well in his scheme and in his defense. So after practice, I got a chance to catch up with Dante Fowler about where his career is, what he brings to the Commanders, and what he thinks about Jamin Davis. A year ago, when you're putting on the star on your helmet, if I told you a year later you'd be putting on this uniform, what would you have said?
I would not believe it, especially with the rivalry, how intense the rivalry is. I learned that being in Dallas. I didn't know how intense the rivalry was between those two guys, but it's definitely an honor and a blessing to be playing for the Commanders, but I did not think I was going to play for them officially.
But you followed Dan Quinn here, Joe Whitt here.
Yeah.
Why? Why did you want to play with them again?
I love those guys. I love working for them, and I love playing for them. They are just real guys, real dudes, great coaches. They gave me a call and gave me an opportunity to come out here and play for the Commanders, and I was more than excited to do that.
Obviously, we've dealt with your defense the last few years. Mm-hmm. What makes it special? What differentiates their defense across the league over time?
It's different. They found ways to put the guys in position to win, make plays. Like whatever skill set they have, they're going to maximize that skill set on their defense to the best of their ability for us to go out there and make plays and get off the field and get offense back on the field. The secret to getting turnovers is what? Because you guys were really good at it. Just getting the ball. That's how we lived. We live, eat, sleep, breathe the ball. So as long as we can get the ball out anyway, a strip sack, interception, a forced fumble, any way we can get the ball out, running out the stack, getting the ball, any way to get the offense on the field, that's how we can do it.
I think all of us on the outside wonder, where's the pass rush going to come from? As you think about that with this group right now, and I know it's early, how are you thinking about generating a consistent pass rush here?
Oh, I love it. I know what we're capable of, and I know what we're going to do. Like the outside noise, we really don't care about. I think it's just because maybe it's not no popular guys, no super popular guys on the defensive line, on the edge like that people don't think that we can get it done, but we're going to get it done. So I'm not worried about that. It's just a matter of time when it happens. And, we just use that as motivation and, just keep going. But we're definitely going to get to a quarterback. Dan
Quinn was talking a lot today about positional flex with guys. You really are the epitome of that. You've been a linebacker, you've been a rush end, you've been all sorts of different positions. How do you kind of think about that as a professional football player when you're utilized in different ways?
First of all, it's a blessing because it's Dan puts me in that position to do that. It's up to the coach to put you in those type of positions, to use you to maximize your value. So I appreciate those guys letting me do that, and whatever I can do to help my defense get off the field, whether it's standing up, whether it has my hand in the dirt, whether it's me going inside and being a 3 technique and running some games and winning in the inside, I'm going to do it because I can, and I'm blessed to do it, and they put me in a position, I'm gonna go all out for them.
Let me ask you about one player, because they're asking Jamin Davis to do different things, and you've done that in your career. What would your advice be to him as he tries to learn all these different skill sets?
My advice to Jamin is just to keep going, keep learning, and just keep whatever role you have, just maximize it 100%, because they put you in those positions because they see a lot of potential in you and they want to maximize your potential, which he is going to do. He's an athletic player, a very good player, fast, physical. He's learning the position right now, but man, that guy can go for sure.
All right, last thing. We really don't like the Cowboys around here, so I hope we can turn you and make you understand how much we dislike that team around here.
Trust me, before the games, they used to, especially when we used to come to Washington, like we had a whole hour team meeting about like what the rivalry is and how crazy it is. We can't go outside. When we had to come out here, when we stay in the hotels, our job was to stay in the hotel. So I know how it is, but I'm definitely I'm willing to learn some more history about the Commanders and all that type of stuff. But it's definitely a blessing to be out here.
Dante, thank you. Good luck this year.
Thank you, buddy.
Where this team actually finds a consistent pass rush is probably one of the developing storylines of the summer into the season. They don't walk in here with name players like Chase Young and Montez Sweat, albeit I don't know that Dorrance Armstrong, at least from a numbers perspective, is going to be that far off from what at least Sweat had produced here in his previous few years before the trade last fall. The numbers may be close. Is his overall effectiveness and ability to turn games upside down the way Sweat potentially could, is that going to happen under Dorrance Armstrong? I don't really know, but the numbers may end up being about the same. What does the other side look like? How does Fowler fit into that? How does Cleveland Farrell fit into that? How does potentially Jamin Davis fit into that? The two young guys, KJ Henry and Andre Jones, are going to be fighting for maybe one spot. I wonder how their futures affect the future of Jamin Davis as well. A logjam, but no standout player. And I think that that's what we're going to be watching. How do they generate consistent pass rush? Does it come from the linebackers, i.e. likely Frankie Louvu or Jeremy Chin, or maybe some selective secondary pressures? Quan Martin seems to fit that type of bill. Maybe Defoe could fit that type of bill, but Fowler clearly is someone that they're going to look at and hopefully be the versatile playmaker that he's been in other places and can provide that here as well. Ben Standing from The Athletic is up next. Bram wants to show you ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Here with Ben Standing of The Athletic. All right, so a couple days in, I haven't seen much. Have you? Have you seen anything?
I hate to say no. I did my podcast yesterday, and I was kind of audience, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't tell you that I saw. I can't break down a ton of stuff because I don't quite know what we saw. I'm kind of blaming Dan Quinn for this.
Blame's an interesting word. They could just be.
Well,
this could be coordinated that they don't want us to see what's going on.
Well, there's that, but I'm sort of blaming him because when we're asking him questions, he's giving us mostly vague answers, but without any real specifics about players or positions or whatever. And so from that, I'm not saying that what the coach says drives whatever narrative is taking place, but kind of, because otherwise you're leaving it up to us to make these determinations. If we don't get game tape, we're watching that all happen. I'm watching Jayden Daniels like everybody else. I can't watch all 22 players, so it's kind of hard to see too much right now. But yeah, I think the biggest thing I guess I've seen is just it does feel like the weight is off their shoulders, especially the guys that were here before, and just the vibe overall. I know that was something that began weeks ago at minicamp and so on, but like it's continued here, and this is the happy time of year for sure for any team, but at the same time we know what's gone on here for the last umpteen years, and it does feel different in that regard. So I'm taking that as my biggest takeaway so far.
I think and I got this in the spring and I feel this way now. This is a tight ship. Like they don't want to talk about what they're doing. They don't want to show you what they're doing. They don't want to talk about what you're doing. I'm not complaining about it. I think that's what it is, and I think that's why it's hard that we're sitting here at training camp and it's hard to describe what's going on because they're not actively speaking and giving insight to what is happening around here.
Right, and look, we can go back. We've seen this coming, right? I mean, the coach search was very kept under wraps. The quarterback search, for the most part, was kept under wraps, and this is a continuation of that. And yeah, look, their biggest advantage right now is the fact that a lot of unknowns, right? When they go up against the Tampa Bay Bucks in Week 1, I don't know what the Bucks are looking at to prepare for this. They're looking at tape from Cliff Kingsbury's time with the Cardinals, or whatever Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt did last year with the Cowboys, but those with different personnel. And even if you look at some of these individuals, they're not necessarily going to be playing in the same way, in the same role, certainly not with the same people around them. So that is their advantage right now, and they're going to take full advantage of that advantage.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I think they should not be showing the Buccaneers what they're doing. I remember last year when we were in the spring, and it got to a point where I'm like, I know exactly what Eric Bieniemy's offense is, and maybe that should have been a red flag, because if I can see it, by week 3 the Bills could too. And the element of surprise matters, and maybe it will be beneficial for them.
Yeah, and look, I think still no pads yet. That changes on Monday, I think, and that is when maybe we start to see something. I mean, probably not in the way that we're discussing, like exactly what the offense or defense will look like, but at least that will be the next step in the evaluation opportunities that we have to some degree. So yeah, it's not look, obviously we'd all like to get more insight into what is happening, but it's not a criticism if I'm looking at it from outside of myself. But
selfishly we want the information. But like I get it from their perspective. I'm in their shoes. Why am I telling everybody what we're doing? Why would I?
Right. And that's going to be the interesting thing. Everybody handles things differently. Ron Rivera wanted to, in a lot of ways, I wrote about this at the end of his tenure, generate a narrative of whatever it was at a given time to either change the story or to promote something that he wants to sort of get out there. And these guys are not doing that on any level. And again, when we're watching practice, it does shape what it is we're seeing. And in this case, kind of not shape it, because they're not really saying much. But again, all that said, you are starting to see just how some of the guys move around on the field, get a feel for where, what certain guys can do, and that for them I think is a large part of what they are looking for. Certainly back in minicamp at the time, and now in this first week, trying to figure out who can do what and how that may benefit them, whether it's for every game or just at a random moment. And that seems to be a part of it. That's why I'm waiting for the pads. I mean, we all are, but I think hopefully the pads will change everything, and we'll get a little bit more out of what we see, but also out of the staff.
We're talking about this on Thursday, and because here we are talking about we really don't know anything. And by design, a little bit by, I think they're learning as they go too, because they haven't done a lot with them. They've been at least open with how we're going to evaluate our offensive line when we haven't put pads on them and had practices with them, and we're going to learn more about them when that happens. And yet today you did ask 53-man roster. We got the first 53-man roster question. You asked that purposefully, But what did you expect them to say about that this early in this process?
Well, obviously there's the individual players that they might be looking at, but I was like, do you start planning, do you not think about it at all until you get to the end, or do you start training camp with, okay, here's sort of my idea of what we're looking at, and now let's see how it unfolds over time? And that's what I was looking for was hopefully him saying, we recognize we've got some interesting position battles, whether it's cornerback or the offensive line or whatever, and then at least we'd get something. He basically just said he tells his coaching staff from the start, keep in your own head at least what you're seeing, so that the end of it, the last preseason game, is not over. We're not overweighting that because we haven't been keeping sort of track all along. So I was hoping he would say, because then I even asked him the next question was, has your thought changed since you were head coach in Atlanta in terms of like you want a roster with, this many tight ends and this many safeties or not? And he said, well, the one thing that's changed is I want more players that have that, to use a Rivera term, position flexibility.
Yes, I picked up too when he said it. I perked up too because that was a drinking game for the last 4 years. So.
Yeah. And of course that doesn't completely help. Maybe it gives us a little more, he talked about specifically like linebackers that can rush the passer. So that's, Frankie Louvu, perhaps Jamin Davis. But yes, I mean, that was the point of that. Not like tell me who their 53 is now, because that's the whole point. You want these practices, these preseason games to help show you that. But at the same point, there's got to be some thought as to I want X amount of tight ends on my team. I want, we need to have this position because this is what we're going to run. But again, we'll have to wait for more specifics.
All right, so let me ask you this then, because I've been, we already started having our little conversations on the side with everybody. Are you expecting any surprises? Like there are a couple of guys that maybe you'd perceive as safe are maybe a little more in the crosshairs this summer than maybe some think?
Well, obviously they signed a lot of guys to one-year deals, but when you look at the players who were the holdovers on one-year deals left, i.e. Jamin Davis, as an example, I think all those guys have got to be, well, not all of them, but a lot of them I think got to be more on the bubble than you think. I said on I did a 53 projection for the Athletic somewhere in the middle of this summer, in this break, and I didn't have Jamin Davis on the team. Now, part of that was he has not historically played special teams, which is because he was a starter, and that sort of kind of goes with that. But if you're the third linebacker on a team that's likely going to play 5 defensive backs and 2 linebackers the way most teams do these days, if you're not that guy, then you've got to play special teams. And if he can't do that, well, then that's an issue. But if he can show he can rush the passer and he can get into that mix, well, then now all of a sudden he is that position
flex.
Yes, that Quinn referenced. But
what do you drink when we say position flex? I do either bourbon or tequila. I don't know where you are.
I try not to drink during the week. I save that for Sunday nights. But yeah. So I think a guy like that. I think Bram. Like, we know there's talent, but just hasn't produced. And when you're not, the reality is, when you're a player who is not signed or drafted by the current staff, as silly as it might sound, from the ego perspective, there's much less reason for them to keep you if all things are equal than it would be the other way around, because you're their draft pick. So that, or their signing.
Those are two interesting names. Davis, I don't know either. Like Logan Paulson said this to me yesterday. He said, name me a player who has switched positions successfully. And there are some prime examples of it. I said there's a lot of corners that became safeties. But this is unusual. Now the clock's really ticking on him. He's got to be able to prove that there's a role for him here. And so I think it's interesting. Brown is different. I don't know how deep their receiving core really is. I know they brought some veterans in. He does have a skill set. He does have speed. So I feel a little differently about him, but I'm with you. That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, at that position, I think that after McLaurin and Dotson and I guess Luke McCaffrey,
what's there?
Right. So from that perspective, he could be the fourth guy, or others could emerge depending on what they're looking for skill set wise.
To your point about special teams, he's done it in the past. Actually did it well on coverage units. So he's proven he's willing to do that and he's able to do it.
Yeah, I had him on my 53 because, I kind of have a feel for what he is, and some of these other guys we'll have to see over time. But by the way, just to the point of Jamin Davis, this is the definition of tiny sample size. But the first play today in 11s, they went 3 linebackers. I guess the offense must have had 12 personnel. They went 3 linebackers, and the third linebacker was Jordan McGee, the 5th-round pick.
I noticed that.
Who I believe is going to be a guy that emerges more than we obviously are talking about other rookies a lot. He may be a guy I think that emerges. So that's my point. If Jordan McGee, if they like him more as a linebacker, well, now James getting really pushed even further down the line. And it's not like, look, the edge rusher situation is pretty wide open as well in terms of playing time, but maybe not as much in terms of making the team, because Cleveland Farrell, Dante Fowler, I have to assume they're going to make the team. KJ Henry, I thought, had a reasonably decent second half of last year. So where does that's why I think with Jamin, I don't know where he fits. And just to add a couple other names, on the offensive line, I kind of feel like Ricky Stromberg, Chris Paul might be battling for, if they keep 9, they might be one of them.
It's been noticeable to me that the backup center has not been Ricky Stromberg, so they obviously perceive him as a guard, at least for now. And I'm with you. If that's what it is, then there are only so many positions.
And I gotta kind of get a sense that the injury he had last year was pretty. I think we've come to the point with medical science these days that we just assume guys come back easily enough. And I'm not reporting this, but I kind of think that there may be more to his injury than we know about, and I think that could be the factor. They signed Michael Dieter this offseason, who is the definition of a guy who can play multiple across the interior. But why would you sign that guy if Stromberg you think is ready to go? So I think that's one to watch, just in terms of
close to shot 3, because either one of them you could have said the PF words.
Yeah,
very close.
Right. So yeah, I think and Chris Paul, look, he's played guard. He started a lot of games last year, but he was part of the offensive line that there were a lot of questions about. So I don't think that he's necessarily locked in either. So I think those two guys, just because they've been around, maybe there's not room for either of them, but they may be battling for one spot.
All right, here's another one. I talked to Kym about this. I was talking to Logan about this. I talked to a lot of people about this. I want to get your take on it. And it goes back to, they're vague. They're not really telling us what they're doing. And then when they say some vague things, which is fine, I'm used to that with coaches. When Dan Quinn said the other day, my ears really perked up what he said. There are a couple position groups that we think externally people think is a weakness of ours, but we think internally is a strength. And because we didn't make him say which one that is, we're guessing a little bit. And the funny part is, when I said to Kym, I think he's talking about corner, he said, I think he's talking about something else. And when I said it to Logan, he said, I think he's talking about something else too. So when he said that, what do you think he's talking about?
It's a great question. I kind of initially took it as a coach speak, right? Because obviously they're going to largely think that they've got more than we on the outside might, and they may be,
and that's fair,
and they may be right. I mean, we watch practices, but they do walkthroughs later, so we don't see everything that goes on inside the building.
Everybody has biases. I mean, we look at it and we have our biases to what we think it is. They're sitting over there going, they don't know what they're looking at. I mean, everybody's got biases.
Right. But if you made me guess, I kind of would buy the secondary, because I
actually think it's a deeper group than people think. Yeah. I don't know that they have front-end starters, which I think is the issue. But when I see Michael Davis and Igbenogany and St. Juice.
Nice pronunciation.
I've been practicing.
Yes.
And Forbes to a lesser degree, so I'm wait and see on him. But I don't think that they're weak per se, but I don't know that they have the front end people to deal with the A.J. Browns and C.D. Lambs of the world. So, and that's the question I need answered. But that's why I landed on, plus their pedigree of having performed really well with secondaries through the years, makes me believe, and they probably have a confidence and a well-founded confidence that, we're better here than people are saying we are. So that's why I landed on it, but I'm not sure that's what they were talking about either.
Yeah, I don't know that sure, but they had Deron Bland in Dallas, who went from being a 5th-round pick to setting the record for 5 touchdowns.
6 pick sixes.
Yeah.
He broke the record against Commanders last fall.
I mean, that was wild. When I did my way too early 53-player projection, I had them keeping 12 defensive backs. And to your point, the way I look at this team this year is that this year is really about 2025. Let's hope they win a lot of games. It'll be fun for all of us if they do, but I think they didn't. They realistically are setting themselves up to be a bigger player in the offseason next year, and this year is about setting an identity on the field, inside the building, and taking and seeing what young talent they have. And I think there is a lot of, to your point, maybe not a lot of starting talent per se, but there's interesting pieces behind them. They drafted Dominic Hampton on day 3. He's a really interesting safety who I think could be a big hitter.
He really stood out in the spring too. Yeah. He and McGee were the two, because everybody's paying attention to Jayden. Those two really stood out to them. We'll see what happens, but they both did.
Right, exactly. And the corners, between Sanderstill and Forbes, and to a degree St. Just, I don't know what any of them are going to do this year, but at the same time, it's not like St. Just and Forbes are without potential. We just saw them at their worst last year, basically, on a defense that just imploded across the board. So maybe with this new staff, they both become legit starters. But that's why I think there's potential there, and that's why I would guess that that's the group that they see. Because even on the offensive line, even if you want to say that Cornelius Lucas is good enough, it's not like this. But the ceiling isn't high. I think with the secondary guys, I think there's more upside.
Well, I think we've seen all of those guys. Maybe Cosme could develop into a Pro Bowler. I would buy that.
Yeah.
But the rest of them will not. They're going to be a lot better. I think a lot better. But I think we all know what that ceiling is. That's why I think they said corner, because I don't think you know what the ceiling is on a lot of these people. And I think that's why they're in belief that they can change that with better coaching, better development, better scheme, all of that stuff.
If you wanted to give me another guess, maybe tight end.
Yes.
Because, they obviously, Cliff Kingsbury knows Zach Ertz from their days in Arizona. And I remember in the spring thinking that Ertz was running a bit faster than I was anticipating. Obviously, they draft Ben Sinnott in the second round, whose versatility is the real key, it seems like.
Bates is really good in his role. Very, very good in his role. And they may got a hit in Armani Rogers. That was something that was a couple of years ago. I went, that's a versatile weapon that might help them as a number 4 tight end.
Right. So that one maybe is where you're at. I mean, I think we're all pretty good with their running back and receiver, fine, and whatever. So yeah, I think those would be the spots. But yes, but this is the point. That's as close as we could get to getting any information.
That's right.
That they think they may have some better units than we think, or the outside world thinks, and yet we're having to guess what they are.
Yeah, we're guessing. That's all it is. We're guessing. All right, Ben, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bram, always a pleasure, man. Thanks.
All right, time for our weekly Spirit Spotlight with one of my partners in the broadcast booth for the Washington Spirit, Michael Minnick, who is on duty with NBC, getting all of the action from the Paris Olympics. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I am great. Living the dream at the Olympics, literally. This is pretty cool to be able to do stats and kind of do what I do for you guys, but do it for NBC for a couple of weeks.
I know the opening ceremonies haven't happened yet, but we did have our first result, and it was the United States beating Zambia, and Trinity Rodman scored the first goal and honestly could have had a couple of more. What did you make of the first outing by the United States women's team?
Good to see the early start. 9 or 10 shots in the first 10 minutes. I thought, here we go again. Anybody that saw the Costa Rica friendly that led up to the Olympics, a lot of chances, no goals. But then to see Trinity kind of break the dam, Mallory Swanson get 2, that was good. And then obviously the red card in the 30th minute for Zambia changed things a little bit. They were more defensive, opportunity to play, but good to salt that away early. Good to get 3 points, and also good in the greater scheme of things to get that +3 in the goal differential, because that's something that's going to carry over in a tough group. That might be the difference between finishing first, second, or third and advancing is those 3 goals you put away today.
And I was watching the broadcast, and the announcers brought this up, and I wanted to just kind of get your sense of this. 3-0 is obviously a dominating win, and it's a really good start, obviously, for the women's team. But they were kind of emphasizing that maybe it should have been a couple more, because in the end, goal differential does matter. So are we nitpicking here a little bit, or what's your take on that?
I think maybe a little bit. It's a fair point. And I think also a lot of times you will see a team that's an underdog give their best shot in the first game, right? Because they have more time to prepare. They're getting ready, just for that first opponent, and they have their full strength. I mean, so Zambia now, they've got to play this red card. They're suspended for the next game. You have to worry about injuries. You have to worry about getting a second yellow card. So they're going to put out their best team in the first game, and then the second and third game, they might not be as strong. So I do think it's fair in that perspective where, like, maybe a Germany or an Australia is going to know their situation more, and maybe they will try to score 4 or 5 and kind of pass the U.S. in that way.
Let's talk about Trinity here for a minute. I mean, she scored a goal. She near missed on a header in the first half, had a near miss early in the second half. We've gotten accustomed to her level of stardom in the NWSL. What did you just kind of make of what her place is and what her role is now on the U.S. women's national team?
I think so, and I think the good thing, too, is it's a very similar role and position, right? It's a 3 front for the Spirit, 3 up front for the U.S. You're playing on that one side. You're being asked to not only attack up that wing, but come back and defend and help that midfield 3. So I think the situation she's played in with the Spirit really has prepared her well for the U.S. and vice versa, because it's a very similar sort of thing that she's being asked to do by both teams.
Okay. No one considers, Zambia to be a serious threat for a medal. So what's just your overall sense of where the U.S. women's national team is as they move forward through this tournament?
They're a medal contender. It's been interesting watching some of the other teams in the tournament. Like, I had France and Colombia as one of my first day games for the women. France got up 3-0. Colombia came all the way back with Lacey Santos, by the way, who's coming to play for the Spirit. Got that game to 3-2. So, even though the U.S. cruise, that wasn't always the case for some of the more experienced teams. Spain had to really fight and were actually down to Japan, came back and won that game 2-1. So some of the major contenders have had more trouble than the U.S. And again, some of that's quality of opponent, but also it shows that the U.S. was able to build something and keep it. I mean, we've seen Barbara Banda play in NWSL. We know what she can do. To keep her off the board today was good.
Okay. Croy Bethune was a late call-up to the main roster today. She didn't get into the match. Is that right? Right? She didn't get in?
I don't believe she did.
Okay. What did you make of that decision? And could you see a role for her as a rookie in the NWSL playing a role on the U.S. women's national team this early in her career?
I think the interesting thing is, obviously the Jayden Shaw injury was what necessitated putting her on the roster. So we'll see if that carries over to the second game and the third game. They have been a little bit more fluid with the rules for injury replacements. It used to be once you were off, you were off. But that's not the case anymore. So Shaw can come back.
Okay.
So I'm curious to see if they keep Croy in the 18. And then, because you can only take 18 players for this tournament, it's a really tight window for substitutions, right? Because you get 5 and then 6 for a concussion. So one of those is your backup goalkeeper. So really, you have to go in and say, I only have 6 field subs. I'm going to use 5. Who fits into the material for this? I think Croy Bethune is exactly the kind of player you want to have for the last 5 or 10 minutes of a game, right? We've seen her heroics with the Spirit. She's that player that can make a big play in a big. I like her hopefully being kept on this roster as someone who can come on in a tie game with the U.S. down a goal to change your results.
Let's get into the Spirit here for a minute. You were unfortunately not able to be part of the last couple of broadcasts with us. What was just your general sense of how they went into this break by changing the coach officially? Jonathan Heraldez actually took over for the last match. What was just your general takeaway of how they were playing and what they did in their final match as they headed into the Olympic break?
I know we talked before the North Carolina game that seems to be the team that really doesn't match up well with the Spirit from the Spirit's perspective. That proved to be the case, unfortunately, in that game. Couldn't really generate much offense. Robin had a great chance in that game. You lose that game, you say, okay, that's North Carolina. I think it was really interesting that they made the decision to make the coaching transition. Clearly it worked, though, because I think that performance against Bay FC was very good from the beginning. I'm really encouraged by the job that this team has done to rotate players, to find different heroes. Courtney Brown, McKenna Morris, Kate Wiesner, some of these lesser rookies that weren't, the Croy Bethune top 5 draft picks have come in and done well. So now I'm curious to see how that carries over after the Olympics. Lacey Santos is playing here for Colombia. Esme Morgan has been in training. That's been really good about this stretch here with the Summer Cup. Has been able to kind of get these players in training and get them in an atmosphere where they've been able to get used to kind of the expectations of the coaches, work with not the whole team, obviously, but most of the team, you kind of get used to things. I think that's really going to pay off for the Spirit. as they head into the second half of the season. I like that better than signing somebody now at the Olympics and not having time to kind of transition them in. This group that's coming in has had some time to kind of adjust.
Okay, so do you have an expectation that these international players that they've signed and are going to be there and available are going to be utilized quickly in the, quote unquote, second half of the season when they get going again?
Yes, I'm less sure maybe about the attacking end. I think Morgan absolutely goes into your rotation at center back because they've been fortunate that McKeown and Boutel have stayed healthy. McKeown's played every minute so far. That's been a blessing. They really don't have a lot of depth in that position. And then Santos, it was interesting watching her today. She was taking the set pieces for Colombia, and I feel like that's a spot that the Spirit need. Like, Andy Sullivan is a solid corner kick taker, but that's a spot maybe you can upgrade strategically, is having somebody a little bit different kick set pieces. And Santos played a pretty similar role in that defensive midfield spot to what we've seen Andy Sullivan play, what we've seen Hal Hirschfeld play, what we've seen Paige McCare play. So I think that's someone that gives you depth, maybe not an every game starter, but somebody that can get in that rotation and start, maybe half the games, 2/3 of the games down the stretch.
All right, Mike, thanks so much. And let's catch up next week and we can do an update on where the U.S. team is in the Olympics and continue to preview what it looks like on the other side when everybody returns. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.
Everybody, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. Bram wants to show ESPN 630 Sports Capital.